Well, a very good morning, friends, and welcome to another Technical Thursday. And you're here with me, Rocky Stevenson, pastor of Benoni Bible Church, and we're continuing in what we've been doing in regard to Bible overview. And last week we finished off before we managed to get into 1st and 2nd Kings, and so we are heading into 1st and 2nd Kings. A very happy birthday to my son Levi. It's his birthday today, 7 years old. He's been excited for this day, and we've been excited for this day. I can't believe how quick time goes, already 7. But we're looking now at 1st and 2nd Kings, and inside of 1st and 2nd Kings, we see the division, decline, and the deep dissatisfaction of the kingdom. This is one of the major themes that we see there. And so some of the key passages, 1 Kings 11, verse 11 to 13, and then 2 Kings 17, verse 7 to 18. Let me read to you those two passages. 1 Kings 11, 5 to 13 says, "For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the detestable idol of the Ammonites. And Solomon did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and did not follow Yahweh's fully, as David his father had done. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, on the mountain which is east of Jerusalem, and for Molech, the detestable idol of the sons of Ammon. Thus also he did for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. Now Yahweh was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned away from Yahweh, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice, and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not walk after other gods. But he did not keep what Yahweh had commanded. So Yahweh said to Solomon, because this has happened with you, you have not kept my covenant and my statutes, which I have commanded you, so I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." What a sad reality with Solomon. Solomon the wise. This man had such wisdom, but his heart was turned away from God. Many times, even in Sunday school stories, we will often hear about how Solomon had chosen the right thing when he asked for wisdom. But if only he knew by the end of his life that he should have asked for an undivided heart. And how sad is that, brothers and sisters, that even when you have all the wisdom of Solomon, who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, who wrote the book of Song of Solomon, who wrote the book of Proverbs, there was such a wise man in his day that the people from around the world were coming to visit him, how his heart was turned away from the Lord because of his foreign wives who had their foreign idols, and how he would become not just the temple builder of the grand temple of the people of Israel, but he built all of these idol temples. How sad this reality is. Now, we're not building idol temples, but many a times we in our day are tempted towards mixing with the world, when we should be those that are wholeheartedly pursuing the Lord. In 2 Kings 17, verse 6 to 18, we see another key passage in the sections in 1st and 2nd Kings. And listen to what it says in verse 6 to 18. In the 9th month of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria and took Israel away into exile to Assyria, and settled them in Halal and Habor, on the river of Gazon, and in the cities of the Medes. Now this happened because the sons of Israel had sinned against Yahweh their God, who had brought them up from the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods. You see this theme that is in 1st and 2nd Kings, the way that Solomon starts going after other gods, and how these other kings after Solomon went after other gods instead of being holy in their worship of Yahweh alone. And they walked in the statutes of the nations whom Yahweh had dispossessed from before the sons of Israel, and in the statutes of the kings of Israel which they had made. And the sons of Israel did things secretly which were not right against Yahweh their God. Moreover, they built for themselves high places in all their cities, from watchtowers to fortified city, and they set for themselves sacred pillars and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burned incense on the high places as the nations did, which Yahweh had taken away into exile before them. And they did evil things, provoking Yahweh to anger. And they served idols, concerning which Yahweh had said to them, You shall not do this thing. Yet Yahweh warned Israel and Judah by the hand of all his prophets and every seer, saying, Turn from your evil ways, and keep my commandments, my statutes according to all my law, which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by the hand of my slaves the prophets. However, they did not listen, but stiffened their neck, like their fathers, who did not believe in Yahweh their God. You see, the big problem was not really the idolatry or the immorality, but it was the fact that they did not believe in their God. They did not trust in the Lord, and therefore they looked for other ways to satisfy their soul, instead of Him alone, who is able to satisfy the soul. Continues there and says, They also rejected His statutes and His covenant, which He cut with their fathers, and His warnings, with which He warned them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the nations which surrounded them, concerning which Yahweh had commanded them not to do like them. And they forsook all the commandments of Yahweh their God, and made for themselves molten images, even 2 calves, and made an Asherah, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served Baal. Then they made their sons and their daughters pass through the fire, and practiced divination and omens, and sold themselves to do what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, provoking Him to anger. So Yahweh was very angry with Israel, and caused them to depart from His presence. None was left except the tribe of Judah alone. So what do we see with 1st and 2nd Kings? Well, we see the united kingdom under David and under Solomon, which eventually divided into Israel, the northern kingdoms, and Judah, the southern kingdom, due to Solomon's disobedience as well as the people's sin. And the books of Kings details the rise as well as the fall of various leaders and the eventual exile of both kingdoms. And what are some of the key points that we see in 1st and 2nd Kings? We see the consequence of idolatry, because Solomon's idolatry led to the kingdom's division. And then the northern kingdom persisted in their idolatry, resulting in their destruction by the Assyrians, as we saw in 2 Kings 17, 7-18. And that happened in 722 BC. Now, God's judgment and His mercy, we see this as well, because despite repeated warnings through prophets, both of these kingdoms faced judgment due to their disobedience. Later on, 586 BC, we have the fall of the southern tribe of Judah. However, God promises, and He promises mercy even, and His mercy remains evident throughout even this preservation of the remnant, because you've got a remnant that is always left of Israel. But we see the deep dissatisfaction of the people of God. The people of God are dissatisfied with God, their Lord. They want to be like all the other nations that were driven out before them. They want to be like the people of Egypt with their gods that they've worshipped. You see, part of the problem with man is he wants to be able to control God. And as soon as he's able to control his God, he has made an idol. But the reality is that that idol begins to also then control him. And that's the demonic nature of any form of false worship. And this is what has happened to Israel in 1st and 2nd Kings. Then what is the practical application for us? Because we see the decline of the kingdoms, emphasizing the importance of faithfulness to God, as well as the dangers of turning away from Him. We should be those that turn wholeheartedly to the Lord, and where we check our own hearts to make sure that we are not divided in our heart and our affections of God. And believers are encouraged to heed God's warnings, as well as to remain steadfast in their faith before Him. Let's then add in the book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles into our study today. And here we see the faithfulness of God as well as the need for obedience. There's 2 major key themes or verses that I want to share with you. 1st Chronicles 17, 11-14, and then 2nd Chronicles 7, verse 14. 1st Chronicles 17, verse 11-14 says this, It will be when your days are fulfilled to walk with your fathers, that I will raise up one of your seed after you, who will be of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build for me a house, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be my son, and I will not take my loving kindness away from him, as I took it from him who was before you. but I will settle him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. Now, of course, 1 Chronicles 17:14 to 11 to 14 speaks of the Davidic covenant, and we have that in regard to what we find with somebody like Solomon reigning on the throne of his father David. And then 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14 says, "And my people who are called by my name, when they humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their evil ways, then I will listen from heaven, will forgive their sins, and will heal their land." So while the books of 1st and 2nd Kings primarily focus on the political and the moral failings of Israel and Judah, 1st and 2nd Chronicles actually provides a theological perspective that emphasizes God's covenant faithfulness and also the importance of obedience. We can see the way that when there's repentance by man, then there's a relenting of the disaster by God. And so Chronicles actually retells the history of Israel with a focus in particular on the Davidic line as well as on the temple, and highlights the spiritual lessons from Israel's history. And some of the key points of the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles is that Chronicles emphasizes God's unwavering faithfulness in his covenant promises, particularly the Davidic covenant, as we saw in 1 Chronicles 17:11 to 14. But there is also the call towards obedience, because the book repeatedly highlights the need for the people to seek God and obey his commandments. And 2 Chronicles 7 verse 14, as we read earlier, really shows us this call where God's people, if they are to humble themselves, if they are to pray, if they are to seek his face and turn from their wicked ways, to receive his forgiveness and his healing, they will be able to have prosperous lives and a prosperous society that is obeying the voice of the Lord. And we see also we see these lessons from history, because Chronicles reminds us about the post-exile community. It reminds the post-exile community of their identity as well as their calling as God's people, because that's part of what Chronicles did. Because you've got people that come back from the Babylonian captivity, and they have 1st and 2nd Chronicles to look back and see how God was so faithful. And then there's also the focus on worship and the temple and the proper relationship that his people ought to have with him. And the practical application for us is, just as the chronicler urged the post-exile community to remain faithful to God, we are also called by 1st and 2nd Chronicles, by the same Spirit who inspired that word, to prioritize our own relationship with God and to live in obedience to his word. And we are encouraged to learn from the past. We are to uphold the principles of true worship and trust in God's faithfulness. And so the narrative of the divided kingdom and the lessons from Chronicles reminds us of the consequences of disobedience, as well as the importance of remaining faithful to God. So both the books of Kings and Chronicles emphasizes God's mercy and judgment, which go hand in hand, urging us to live lives of obedience and humility and repentance as we reflect on these historical books. May the Lord help us as we do this. Amen.